Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Hawks Nest. Well, our Seahawks continued their magical run this year, going back out on the road again, and again getting another victory against that tough, gritty Philadelphia crew. Russell Wilson played phenomenally when the Seahawks needed it most, getting over 300 yards passing, having over 50 yards on the ground, as certainly that offensive line, as battered as it was unable to generate any holes against that tough Philadelphia front. DK Metcalf had what I would consider his national coming out party. Of course, all of us 12s out there already understand that this guy is on the road to stardom. But finally, you kind of got to see all of those pundits that still had remained saying, limited route tree, first round bust in the making. Well, all those guys had to crumple up their paper and throw it in the trash. Because finally, everyone can see you don't set the rookie yardage record for a receiver in the playoffs unless you're something special. There's a reason he did it. And this is a guy real young still. Let's not forget he's only 22 years old. So fantastic to see that development along with the victory.
Oh, I tell you about these rookies, man.
The defense also played great, and you have to say a lot about how they were able to generate pressure, even when they weren't able to get necessarily turnovers. That pressure was probably the difference of the game, certainly as they finished up the last defensive play with the sack on the quarterback as he was trying to scramble into the end zone. So great to see the defense take that step up. Certainly Quandre Diggs seems like the secret sauce, right? The missing ingredient that we absolutely desperately need in that secondary, because when he's in there, everything just seems to play much better. Certainly, they're still giving up yards in the running game, and that's disconcerting, especially when you're looking at playing a Packer team this week that's very, very good at running the football. But they're still not giving up touchdowns, which is a big focal point of this defense. They're still keeping the big plays to a limited scope. And if they can just start to get some pressure within that, I've always maintained that can be just enough, especially if that offense can kind of take that step to being super dynamic and giving you a lot of points, giving the defense a little bit of room for error. But this game was really about the word attrition. Both of these teams came in here as the walking wounded. Seattle was down 3/5 of their offensive line, 3 running backs, 3 wide receivers. They're starting outside linebacker. You've got injuries on that defensive line and in that secondary that those guys are playing through. And the Eagles likewise were in similar shape. And certainly Carson Wentz's injury in the first quarter felt like for them bridge too far. It was just a little bit too much for them to have to take, and that was pretty much as they were going to get at that point. The Seahawks just kind of leaned on them throughout the rest of the game, very similarly to the first game, though we ran the ball better in the first game. So a great victory on to Green Bay and Lambeau Field and the frozen tundra. Let's see if our Seahawks can once again pull out another win. We're 3 mere victories away from another Super Bowl championship. Think about that.
Tell him to put 2-4 in the game.
To the line of scrimmage, Marshawn Lynch in the backfield. He takes a handoff. He stops. He comes back inside. He's still in. He's in for a touchdown.
It's been a couple weeks since we did our last Hawks Nest episode, and I didn't get a chance to cover the epic return of one Marshawn Lynch. I don't know if there's been another event this year that has brought a bigger smile to my face than Marshawn coming back and repping again that 24 jersey for the Seattle Seahawks. This is a guy who, when he came in 10 years ago, had helped to set the tone for this team. His sheer will, his determination, his physicality, it put everyone in that mindset on the team. Everyone kind of fell in a line behind him. He may not be the most vocal leader, but with his play, he helped to really lead the way in a lot of respects back then. And so I'm not a nostalgic guy. I'm still fully aware that he doesn't have as much tread on the tires as he once had. And he probably isn't as quick and he probably isn't as fast. But as we've seen, he's still a guy with that sheer will of determination to get a yard when there's not a yard there to get. And this is a guy that you shouldn't underrate as well in another key aspect of his game, which is the pass protection game. If we had all of our running backs healthy and Marshawn Lynch on the roster, he would be by far our best pass protector. This is a guy who you can put in one-on-one situations and feel confident with him and on blitzers. And that's what Seattle's faced a lot of this year. Those 5-man fronts that have been constant with the blitzer. Or you've got the spy, as we saw this last week with Malcolm Jenkins, who will be lurking and then coming on a blitz once he sees a free hole. Having a guy like Marshawn who can pass protect like he can is going to be vital for us, especially we got to go on the road twice here in the next couple weeks to get back to the Super Bowl. So an awesome development that he has come back. I still think he's got some vintage carries in him. We saw it on that touchdown run here against the Eagles in this last game. I'm super hyped up about this move. I love seeing it. And if there's any of you out there that was on the fence as to whether or not he had earned a place in that Ring of Honor when he retires, let those people now go silent. He's earned it. This guy coming back now and saving the day, because if all we had is Travis Homer and Robert Turbin right now, we are in trouble. We're in trouble. We're probably not winning that last game against the Eagles. Maybe not. And we're certainly not winning this game against the Packers. So great move by the Hawks. Thank you, Marshawn Lynch. And take your place up there in that ring of honor as soon as you're done.
And Russell play fake. Now he's going to throw down the middle. Got a man. Metcalf makes the catch. He is in for a touchdown.
Oh my goodness, DK Metcalf had a game. The kid set a rookie wide receiver record for the NFL, over 160 yards in the air, and could have been even more. He just missed on one play with Russell where Russell had the pass protection break down. And if it was a half second longer, you're adding another probably 70 yards to that total. He's over 200 yards for the day and 2 touchdowns at that point. And I think this has just been the culmination of what we've seen building throughout this year with DK. He's been pretty darn consistent game in and game out. He had a little bit of the dip midway through the year where the dropsies kind of started to enter into it a little bit. And people really started to kind of overstate it from my standpoint. A lot like his lack of ability to run the route tree. People get caught up on the negatives with him and really overlook, I feel like, the positives with him when you got to look at this thing from the wide angle lens is how I would put it. And when you match this guy up with the Julio Jones and the Calvin Johnsons of the world and you look at their rookie years, he's right there with them statistically, if not eclipsing them in many marks. So get excited about this kid. This is a star in the making. This is a guy that's going to be a preeminent Pro Bowler because when you take that physical skill set and now we're starting to understand about his work ethic and his ability, his willingness to go the extra route, to stay after practice, to work with Russell intrinsically, to get on that same page, that is where you get greatness.
Okay, well, I'm a witness here. What I seen was a horrible, tragic situation. The guy was coming down, and I guess the police was trying to do a stop point. The man said, no, not today, and they began to race behind each other like cats and dogs. The police officer got behind the man and started going so fast, his car spit out of control. Girl, he hit the pole. His head went to one side, and his body went to the other side, and this is the result.
All right, I'm going to get into it. The Jadeveon Clowney Carson Wentz tackle. Let's dive in here, okay, and unpack this. The Philadelphia Eagle fans, who I did not know whined this much, have been crying incessantly since that tackle in the game, saying it was a dirty play and that Wentz was supposed to be protected and there should have been a flag. And basically, they should have just taken Jadeveon out on the field right there and shot him for what he did. If you just listen to him, that's what they'd have you do. But I think we need to just back up a little bit, Philadelphia fans, for a second and really try to analyze this with as unbiased an eye as we can potentially try to bring ourselves to watching it with. Okay? First, Carson Wentz leaves the pocket. Let's be very clear about this. He loses his protections as the quarterback at that point. He becomes a runner, akin, let's say, to a running back. And if you saw this play happen to a running back on any given play, no one out there would shrug or bat an eye or raise their hands up in disgust. It's because it's a quarterback that it happens to that's got your hackles all up. But let's continue to dive further into it. Targeting. Was it targeting? No, it's not targeting. He's falling down and lands on top of him. Again, a play we've seen over and over and over again. And you know what would have prevented this for Carson Wentz? You know the one thing that would have stopped it? Sliding. Yes, sliding. If he would have just gone feet first, there is no man to fall on him. And if the man does fall on him at that point, it is a flag. But because he goes head first, because he's trying to get every last yard he can get, he gets injured. And this falls in line with what we've seen with Carson Wentz up until this point, right? He's been injured a couple times. And something I've heard specifically from Philadelphia Eagle fans is that the guy plays too recklessly. He's too wild. He doesn't protect himself enough. And I've seen this myself as we've played them a couple times since Wentz has got there. The kid plays with a wild abandonment. It's fun to watch. It gives you some great big time plays at times. He had a play against the Seahawks a couple years ago where he's falling down and throws a ball 50 yards as he's being tackled. It's fantastic. But unfortunately, it doesn't protect you very well. One of the things that drives us crazy about Russell Wilson, or at least has driven me crazy about him over the last couple of years, is his penchant for going to that slide so early. It sometimes looks like he'll give up 2, 3, 4, 5 yards just to make sure that he's getting down so that that defender doesn't come in there. And why? Because of this reason right here. If you even show a moment of hesitancy there, the officials will not flag it and will allow the defender to fall on you. You've got to protect yourself as a quarterback. Carson Wentz has not learned this lesson, and that has nothing to do with Jadeveon Clowney or the way he tackled him. It has to learn with Carson understanding that he is the quarterback, is the most important player on the football field, and he has to protect himself thusly, which he has yet to learn to do. Little Joey Hunt is the engine that could. He goes out there every week and he gives it his all. He's trying his best, but he's obviously a little bit outgunned. The guy is small, probably under strength, probably not the fleetest of footed. So can we please stop singling him up with some of these awesome defensive tackles? It is getting painful to watch him get bent in half every week. His little ankles in there just shaking as the strength runs into him. I can't watch it. It's painful to watch. And frankly, I'm really worried you're going to get Russell Wilson killed. Hunt's a great story. He's not a long-term solution there as a starter at center. I don't necessarily want Britt there long-term anymore either, not at that $9 million a year price tag. But he's been solid. He's doing his best. With that said, stop singling him up. He's going to get killed. The Ziggy Ansah experiment has been pretty much a complete failure. He looks slow, he looks old, he looks unathletic, and you saw even in this game, even worst of all, I think, is that he just doesn't seem like he's got that same kind of fire that you need to have as an NFL football player to operate out there. There was one point where you had Josh McCown, 39-year-old, slow-footed, never known for being the fleetest of foot, might I add. And he's out on the edge and he runs around. Ziggy's got him out there on the edge with him. And this guy outruns Ziggy to the point that Ziggy falls down and then injures his neck again, which he seems to do on nearly every other game he's getting injured, which falls right along with what happened in Detroit oftentimes. This is just a guy who can't either seem to play through the pain or his body just completely breaks down on him time and time again. Either way, it's a move that hasn't worked, and Seattle allotted a lot of money this offseason to this Ansah experiment. I'd like them to do the same this year as far as allotting money to that pass rush and really beefing it up, and that's going to be for another Hawks Nest episode. But the bottom line is that you need to go for more sure things rather than shooting for the moon on those pass rushers. We need more guys that we can rely upon being into that mode of that 5 to 9 sacks and causing the disruptions in the pocket rather than the guys that it's a boom or bust type situation. There's plenty of quality pass rushers out there on the market who will last even past that May 1st deadline for free agency that you can go out there and get by spending a very little amount of money. I'd much rather see Seattle go this route than what they did here, really shooting for the moon on a player who looked done a couple years ago. Cody Barton has played pretty darn good for the Seahawks. He certainly has shown his rookie warts at times, overrunning plays, not diagnosing things correctly. But you can see there's a lot of energy there. He gets to the ball carrier. He's a pretty sure tackler. And they do say he is the best coverage linebacker that they have on the team, which I think is saying something. So he does have a future, I think, with the Hawks and potentially as being a starter down the road. With that said, if there was a time that you were going to finally, as the Seahawks, switch out of this base look that you're holding in, being that you stay with those 3 linebackers on the field rather than going to a slot corner when the offenses go to 3 wide receivers, now would be, I think, a time to maybe make that transition. Cody has not looked comfortable out there when you've got that slot wide receiver. And we saw that with Cooper Kupp, especially in the Ram game, where it was brutal at times, where you had him out there matched up in space with Kupp, and Kupp would just eat him up. I think the Packers and Aaron Rodgers would do something similar if you show them that matchup time and time again in this game coming up. And Ugo Amadi was just recently rated in this last game by Pro Football Focus as the top-rated defensive player by the Seattle Seahawks. Of anybody else, defensive line included, he was the best rated player. Now, I know that the Pro Football Focus grades aren't the end-all be-all to everything, but I think it does show us what we're seeing out of Ugo, which is that he's earned the right to get more playing time out there. And I think it makes it harder on these quarterbacks. It'll make it harder on Aaron Rodgers if you've got a slot cornerback out there to read what they're going to do. Because when you've got the extra linebacker out there, now they can pretty much know with almost 100% certainty that it's going to be a zone you're going to be playing. And so then the quarterback can understand how his route concepts are going to work to attack that zone. And it just makes everything easier pre-snap. And I know that the Seahawks defensive coordinator would come back at me and say, well, hey, hold on. We do this because we want to stop the run with that 3rd linebacker. That's why we bring this guy out there. Well, that's all well and good, but you haven't stopped the run very well when having that 3rd linebacker out there, even in 3 wide looks. Teams have still been able to run the ball on you pretty well. So it isn't attaining what you're wanting it to attain by having this look. I understand that they were trying to be revolutionary this season by going back old school like that, but it just hasn't really worked. And if there is a time to make a change, it's right now to do something different. At the very least, you'll catch Green Bay off guard.
Blitz is coming. Russ is going to let it fly. He's got Metcalf deep. Metcalf reaches up.
Here we go again. The Packers on the road, Lambeau Field, the frozen tundra. It's going to be a dogfight, no doubt. And on the surface, this does look like it's going to be a tough win for the Seahawks to pull away from, right? The Packers are great at home. They've been great at home for years. It's a hard environment to play in. Rodgers has been just as good, if not better, than Favre was playing in that environment. And so things look a little bit dicey for the Seahawks team on the surface of things. The Packers are rested. They're relatively healthy. Seattle's walking into this missing a bunch of guys. But with that said, you just got to dive a little bit deeper into some of the more advanced stats with this to really look at and understand the Seattle's got a really great chance in this game. First off, the Seahawks have the number 1 rated strength of schedule in the NFL this season. No other team played as tough a schedule as this Seahawks team played. Well, while conversely, if you look at the Packers, where were they at? 27th? 27th. So there's only 5 other teams that played an easier schedule than the Green Bay Packers this year. And this holds true when you look at their schedule. There's not really a lot of meaningful wins there, a lot of tough wins. And you see things like the Chargers, who have always sucked going in and playing in cold weather, right? They went back out east and beat the Packers in Lambeau. I think that's significant. So they do have some holes there. This isn't the same Packer team from 2014 that had the solid offensive line and dynamic weapons and 2 running backs and a defense that was very stacked. It didn't have a ton of stars, but everyone was really, really good at their position. They had no weak links on that team. This team's a little bit different. And while they're okay defensively and they can get after the quarterback, they're not going to necessarily, I think, cause Seattle the same problems as far as getting after the quarterback other teams had. Who's really killed us this year as far as in the pass rush? It's those Aaron Donald. It's the Fletcher Coxes. It's those defensive tackles down low, even Geno Atkins in the first game of the year against the Bengals. It's those guys who can create pressure up the middle. I feel like on the edges, we can kind of get around that. Russell knows how to swing around those guys when they beat the tackles, and the tackles know how to work around Russell on it. And as well, you can always get a chip in there with a guy like Marshawn, who's very good at that, as we were talking about earlier. So it's not as worrisome with the Ladarius and Zedarius and Marius Smiths out on the side who are rushing, and they don't have as much a dynamic guy in the middle. Now, Kenny Clark is very dynamic down there in the inside, but he is coming into this game a little bit injured. So I would look for Seattle to actually be able to pass protect relatively well. And the Packers do have a tendency within their defense, this has played out through the year, to what? Give up big plays and struggle to stop the run, which is exactly what Seattle does from an offensive side of the ball. So Seattle is offensively, schematically set up to beat this Packers defense. If you were to ask the Packer defense or their defensive coordinator, what kind of offense would you ideally like to play? I bet it would be more of the pass-happy spread offenses that they would really flourish against. And Seattle is the opposite of that. So I'd expect them to do okay there. As well, that Quandre Diggs return over on that defensive side of the ball, I think, is going to make it tough for Aaron Rodgers. Do not forget, Quandre played Aaron Rodgers twice a year throughout his whole career leading up to here playing with the Hawks. I think he's got some insider trader secrets there that he can maybe help to divulge to the rest of the guys in playing Aaron that much. So I look for Seattle to actually be able to generate some pass rush, having Diggs back there and Clowney starting to come back into tow. And maybe we can even start to see Jaron, who I know has been fighting through that ankle sprain throughout this year, getting back to health himself. Because I look for them to be able to generate some pressure against that offensive line. It's a pretty good offensive line. You still got the Balagas and the Bakhtaris and those guys over there that are pretty good stalwarts for them. But you can still get up through them in the middle. You can still get them with Clowney. I don't think they have an answer for that. So I see this as a close game. I don't think the Packers are going to blow us out on the road. It looks like the weather is going to hold up. I think it'll be a dogfight that goes back and forth right down to the wire, as we've seen all season with every Seahawks game pretty much. With that said, I'm going to give the Seahawks the edge in this one. I've just got some kind of feeling about it that they're going to turn their way on this one, that they've sort of turned the corner, that they can see their greatest self there, and they can see what it takes to kind of attain that. And with DK popping off, with Russell kind of getting locked back in, and with that defense potentially kind of rounding into shape, really they're coming together at just the right time.
We got a lot of work to do. We're going somewhere, man. We're going somewhere. Let's go. Hawks on three. 1, 2, 3. Hawks!
That about does it for us today. Just as a reminder, I'm going to be live streaming my reaction of the game during the game, so come on into the game chat. Let's talk it out, hash it out, break it down, all that good stuff. Everyone's invited. Thank you so much, as always, for watching and liking and commenting and subscribing. You guys are doing all of the above, and it continues to help this channel just grow right through the roof. We're nearly to 2,000 subscriptions, and I'm not even a year old as a channel. Simply amazing. There are a few of you out there, though, that just aren't quite getting this last lesson that I keep trying to hammer home. I can see a few of you out there that are still having this issue. Just want to let you know, and the Eagle fans, I'm speaking directly to you. Go Hawks!